Okay. Good morning. I will call to order the Emhoe County Board of Commissioners formal session for March 14th, 2024. It is 10:17 in the morning, and I will go ahead and lead us in the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item C is our calendar session. I think we have the mission dinner already on the calendar, but there is a YCSO banquet or volunteer banquet on Sunday that we should probably add if it's not on there. We did. Okay, awesome. Anything else to add to the calendar? Oh, I thought those were already on. Were they? Mondays. It's a joint HHS public safety meeting. Okay, another 4-hour meeting. We've got a lot of those this week. Okay, anything else to add? All right, item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. We did not receive any written comment this week, but if anyone is here to offer public comment, please come forward. Or if you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, hearing and seeing none, we will move on to department updates. There's nothing today. Item F is our work session, and today we have review and discussion of the Sheriff's Office budget. And we are joined today by Sheriff Sam Elliott. Welcome, Sheriff.
Good
And
morning.
just a quick recap, when we were doing these work sessions, we were scheduling them out, we had talked about having the sheriff come prior to budget week so that we can make sure that we have a good understanding of what's going on in the sheriff's budget for the coming fiscal year. And that there's not any, surprises or anything complicated that we just weren't aware of that we have to sort of tackle within the moment during budget week. So the sheriff has gone through his budget and prepared his budget for this coming year. So look forward to hearing about it.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, rest of the board. So this has been a great learning opportunity for me to be working through the budget and just getting familiar with the individual budgets themselves within my overall budget. I would tell you that having sat through some of the discussion last year, we're not in the same position that we were in last year. I'm not going to say that everything is rosy, but there's also not any significant cause for concern, at least for this coming year. The biggest budgets, which would be just the patrol and jail budgets themselves, I'm not anticipating having to make any personnel cuts this coming fiscal year, and they will wind up at the end of the year with small ending balances. The remaining budgets, which are smaller budgets, there's also nothing of significant concern with those budgets. The saving grace, I guess, so to speak, would be our ongoing contract with Washington County, the bed rental contract that we have with them, which has helped to fill some of the gap. And I've had a few opportunities to talk with Mr. Huffer and just make sure that we're in agreement as far as how we look to utilize those funds. That current contract expires the end of June of this year, but I have received indication from Sheriff Massey that they do intend to continue that at least through the next year as they continue to address their staffing issues in Washington County. So I don't look at it as a long-term thing, and I don't look at it as something that I want to rely heavily on as we move forward. But it has allowed us, at least in this coming year, to look at utilizing some of those funds to fill some gaps that we have in our budget. So I'm not anticipating any add back requests for anything in patrol or the jail. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have specifically about anything, but just from an overall high level perspective, getting familiar with the budget and looking at our actuals versus what we have been budgeting in the past, and then making some minor adjustments to bring those more in line with each other, in particular when it comes to overtime and some of our investigations.
Thank you.
I will say, because I've been, we just did admin reviews this week.
Tuesday.
And kind of going through it. The two funds that I would call it, and I don't know if Sheriff, you were going to kind of get to them, but I would probably want to have on the board's radar is, and we know dog control.
Mhm.
I think that one is going to require some discussions, and I know this is scheduled for a work session, kind of long-term plans for
Right.
dog control. And I think that's scheduled for August. But I will say with the current status of the budget and what we're looking at revenue and expense wise, I think that's going to be if we want to try to mitigate, concerns when that's being presented, I do think dog control is going to be one that is going to require some work. Because right now, the way we have it built, there'll be insufficient revenue to carry out the contract and the kennel rentals into the next year unless we address the revenues coming into that. And then I think the other one that I would just flag to for discussion, because this was one that we discussed last year, is Marine Patrol. And I know that was something that was on the board's radar last year. So, maybe you were going to cover those. I just wanted to check. I think those are two areas that are going to require some discussion during budget week.
So dog control, if we had kind of talked about a Band-Aid for this year, because we can't just create this robust dog control program in a few months. So is that technically an add back request for dog control specifically?
I think it will be. I think this will be one of those areas, because again, I want to adhere to the budget process. So when we go into budget committee, we'll be able to present what we have built and proposed into that budget. I anticipate that when we go into deliberations with the budget committee and with the sheriff, I think we're going to have to come up with some short-term solutions or a Band-Aid for next year, and to at least buy some time to have the larger discussion when we get into the fiscal year about the long-term plans for that.
Sheriff, do we have a dollar amount in terms of, I know going forward, we're going to have to come up with something more sustainable, but do we have a dollar figure for what we would be short for dog control? Or what we'd need to pretty much have in the back of our
Right,
mind?
what do we need to shoot for?
What do we
Or,
need
yeah.
to shoot for?
Well, I know after revenues, and if I remember correctly, I believe the total budget that was built, and again, this is preliminary and I'm going off memory, I believe it was 136,000.
139.
139,000 in revenues coming in. But there's some transfers that need to happen because some of those operations have been supplemented out of the patrol budget. And so we're trying to, it's subject to final approval, but looking at transferring funds back to patrol to make patrol whole for those coverages. And so you're basically left with 36,000. And if you're talking, I think the contract with Homeward Bound is,
The kenneling contract is roughly 85,000.
right,
And then the kennel rentals were budgeted at 90.
right. So if that helps kind of paint a picture, we got $36,000 of revenue to cover 160, 140,000 of expense.
Okay, so we need to come up with that money and figure out a way to make sure that we have an idea of how we're gonna do.
Right. And I think, well, and that's why I was kind of, when it's something to have in the back of your mind. That's the deficit that we have right now. And at least once because we're still in version 10, I haven't rolled the budget into version 20. And once we get that, you'll be able to see those numbers, because that's when we first publish and put it on the internet, and kind of post the budget in preparation for the budget committee. And so you'll actually be able to see the actual line items and the numbers and the impacts. And
So right now, if you were to say, how much do you need us to come up with? It would be 140?
Ish.
Roughly, yeah.
Probably
Ish.
even a little bit more,
Right.
just because this did not factor in that we expanded and now have one contracted kennel with Newburgh.
Yeah.
Right.
right.
And so that is the same rate. So I think we'd probably be looking at like 150.
Okay.
And what's it called? Not grants, but what was the funding? Special
Endowment.
funding? Endowment
Endowment.
is done. That's
it is.
totally done.
Yes.
There's no more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm gonna have about the same question for the Marine Patrol.
Okay.
And I guess alls I'd want to know is what we ended up cutting it back by last year, just in case we want to bring it back to whole.
So last year, you might remember that the committee and board approved economic development funds, a $20,000 allocation to help bolster that. We already know that number on what that request is going to look like. What's it, 40?
It's 41,875, which would be essentially a match to what we get from the Marine Board.
And that's just to run the same level of patrols during the summer that we had.
Well, if you did add that 41,875 to the 20,000 from last year, that would be a true 50-50 split between what we receive from the Marine Board in our grant. It would be an increase in the number of hours that we're able to be on the water over last
Okay.
year. Last year was a cut over the prior year. I will tell you that our biennial grant funding from the Marine Board continues to decline every biennium for a variety of reasons, primarily the fact that voter registration is down in the state of Oregon. So I don't anticipate, this will be the second year of the current contract. So it'll be the next fiscal year that we'll see what we'll get from the Marine Board. But that would kind of restore us back to our historical levels as far as the number of hours that we're physically able to be on the water.
Okay.
I don't know how deep we can get to the weeds right now, but my next conversation with that would be, just to prepare you, would be what it looks like to police this, right? So is it on the water or is it at Rogers Landing? Is it going to be more feasible for us if we can't come up with this to patrol at least on land, Rogers Landing, boater tags, hey, where's your Newburgh pool sticker? Just kind of minor stuff like that versus actually getting the boat out on the water, the fuel cost for it, the labor to do that. So I'd want to see a difference of, you think, cost.
I'll have to work on preparing kind of the two options to see. Last year, we did do more of the land-based enforcement just at the boat launch. That doesn't capture the traffic that comes from Heb or some of the other Boone's Ferry,
Okay.
San Salvador, some of the other access points for boats to get onto the water.
Yeah.
Even the Dayton boat ramp, you can navigate down the Yamhill and get onto the Willamette. So you capture a smaller percentage of the users on the water when you're just shore-based at Rogers Landing, because there are multiple other points that people can Wheatland Ferry,
Sure.
get boats onto the water.
Okay. Any other questions for the sheriff?
So as far as your wish list and what you would ideally, I mean, not, pie in the sky, but just realistically and ideally need to really make sure that we could say that we have made your office and fully staffing and all that a priority. What would it look like for for what we would need to know?
For this coming year or longer term?
Well, let's just deal with the,
That's
You
a
know.
big old grin that he had. on
yeah,
his face
you mean
there.
forever?
Let's just talk this year right now.
We have a blank check.
You know, and I've had conversations with the chair as my liaison that staffing wise, we're okay. We're not ideal. If we had all of our allocated staff actually able to work, because we have some out for various reasons, that would have a significant impact. On the patrol side, when you talk about the funding that we're getting from the Bureau of Land Management to do enforcement on public land, and our grant from the Oregon State Parks to do OHV enforcement in the Upper Nestucca area, and our grant from the Oregon Department of Transportation for impaired driving enforcement, you know, those help with supplementing the patrol budget. The issue is those are reimbursement grants, which mean that I have to have somebody working it before I can bill those. When we're short staffing, it's not realistic to have people dedicated to those functions because I need them to perform the core assignment of just rural patrol and filling those contracts that we have with the 5 cities. Staffing is improving. We are making headway with hiring and some folks returning to work. So we haven't realized what our true effectiveness is, even with the staff that we already have in this past year, because we haven't had a full staff as far as budgeted positions, all full and everybody able to work. The biggest concern that I would have in the coming year is we continue to see a significant increase in the workload for our civil division. And that was one of the positions that was cut last year, was our 2nd civil deputy. We're serving all of the subpoenas now for all of the cities in the county because that's a mandated function of the sheriff. And so the civil workload is increased exponentially. And so that would be where one of my biggest concerns is. We do have some vacancy right now in our support services that we just did testing last night, trying to fill, again, positions that we already have budgeted to try to manage the workload for our support services. So, you know, I would say that without having the opportunity to have my full staff, everybody working, and then to see where the deficiencies are, I probably couldn't give you a great estimation of what it would take. There certainly are always things that we need to be looking at on the equipment, materials and services side, but you're going to hear about the radio system when we get to that point. And that's separate from just the need to make sure that we're replacing aging equipment within the sheriff's office. So I did have some, you know, a few things that were kind of wish list items that I tried to put in there, and then they quickly were eliminated to get to a balanced position. So,
Sheriff, we've talked about some critical equipment needs that we have aging equipment for deputies. Is that built into your budget, or is that coming in an add back?
it is built into the budget
Okay.
currently for the necessities that we need to get current.
Okay, any further questions? We'll be hearing more detail, obviously, in a month or so. So
All right.
appreciate it.
Sheriff.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we
Thank
Thank you
appreciate
very
your-
much.
Thanks, Sam. Sure. Sure, Sam.
Okay. So item G is the consent agenda, and there's nothing on consent. Item H is old business. H1, a second reading and consideration of approval in the matter of ordinance 932, adopting the Yamhill County Construction Erosion and Sediment Control Code and amending the Yamhill County Code Enforcement Code. The first reading was held February 29th of 2024. So Jody, if you want to read that by title
title?
only.
I
That'd
will
be great.
do. In the matter of adopting the Yamhill County Construction Erosion and Sediment Control Code, amending the Yamhill County Code Enforcement Code and setting the effective date.
Okay, so that was a second reading, so it'll come back once more.
So now you can deliberate and
Oh,
vote
okay.
to approve or deny.
Okay, I will move approval. Is there further discussion?
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. Thank you. Item I, other business. I1 is consideration of approval of a construction services contract between Yamhill County and Haworth, Inc. for the 2024 Pike Road Bridge Superstructure Replacement Project in the not to exceed amount of $494,209.50, effective upon full execution through October 31st of 2024. And if you recall, we approved an intent to award on February 29th. So this is the actual contract. There were no protests to the contract. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Right, motion passes. Thank you. I2, consideration of approval of a contract employee agreement between Yamhill County and Carla Connors to provide grand jury training not to exceed 24 hours per week in the amount of $40 per hour, retroactive to January 22nd, 2024 through June 30th of 2024. I will move approval. Is there further questions or comments? Sorry.
None.
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. I3, review of applications and consideration of an appointment to the Budget Committee to complete the remainder of Doreen App's term effective immediately and through June 30th of 2025. So we received, I believe it was 4 applicants for this position and very impressive applications. Lots of folks in the banking world that love numbers and budgeting. But before we get into that, I just want to thank Doreen App. She has been a wonderful part of our budget committee. And we're sad to see her go. And every time I see her out in the public, she always lets me know that she's praying for the county and she's praying for the Board of Commissioners. And I just really appreciate that. She's
Mhm.
such a sweet woman,
Yes.
and very smart. So she will be missed.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to open it up to discussion about applicants. Any observations, suggestions, motions?
I was really impressed, as you mentioned, Chair, that we have such a caliber of folks in the community who would be willing to add their expertise, those who are working, those who are retired in these businesses and with the financial background. And I'm glad that folks are getting engaged. It was down to, a couple, but I would recommend that we approve Greg Thorsgaard. His background in business and finance and audits, and it's extensive. And I think we could really benefit. I always appreciate folks in the private sector who come to government with different eyes. I always think about Denny Elmer on our budget committee, who comes to it with, the whole private sector running a business perspective and asks us some pretty hard questions that after you've been in government a while, you kind of tend to forget. Those questions need to be asked. So I'm looking for someone like that to be able to fill the spot.
Okay, so that was a motion, right? Did you make a motion?
I just, it's a suggestion. I haven't made a motion at this point because I don't know if anybody wants to have.
I would agree. Out of all the applications, I mean, his resume went above and beyond. It was very thorough.
Yeah, and I think when I look at the other 2 budget committee members they have private sector, more small business experience, which is fantastic. Greg, however, has been a CFO and managed very, very large companies, private sector companies. So that's a different perspective. And I think that will actually be very helpful in our discussions, considering, that the county is overall a very large business, if you will. So I would agree. I thought his resume was very impressive.
I'm looking at some of those applications and thinking about how else we can tap some of these folks because they've shown interest for other advisory committees that we have. So I plan on reaching out and seeing if there's interest there. Hate to lose them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do we have a motion to recommend Greg Thorsgaard?
So moved.
Okay, is there further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. And welcome, Greg, and thank you for your willingness to serve. It's coming up here pretty quick.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody else who applied.
So we'll do our standard outreach and also just kind of preparing so everybody has dates on their calendars, but budget committee is scheduled to begin April 29th and go through Wednesday, May 1st. So we'll get information out to all the budget committee members and we'll be doing noticing and everything else here in the coming week. So.
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just checking one thing here. Okay, so that concludes other business. We have no public hearings today. And that brings us to announcements. So we had AOC meetings on, was it Monday?
Monday.
And I guess we went over the entire special session. There was a lot there. Bless you.
Bless you.
But I think that it seems that we're kind of focused on House Bill 4002 and the implementation and rollout of that at this point. And it was interesting to hear some of the feedback and kind of recap of what happened, because one thing was very obvious during all of that House Bill 4002 discussion, which is that the legislators in Salem really don't understand what county commissioners do and the kind of local control and authority that we have to implement some of these pieces of legislation that, you know, are connected with law enforcement and the courts and public health and all of these things. So I think it's a good thing. I think there was a lot of education that happened with our legislators in terms of how county commissioners need to be at the table. I hope that continues. But we are continuing to have discussions with CJC. That's happening this coming Monday in terms of how this is going to roll out. Yamhill County is slated to receive about $500,000. We don't know the timing of the funding. But our DA, Bradbury, did gather interested parties on Wednesday morning, yesterday morning, between our courts and law enforcement, which includes sheriff and police chiefs across the county, HHS, and I was present for the meeting just as a preliminary discussion of, okay, here's the results of House Bill 4002. What does that look like for Yamhill County? What does that mean? What could it mean? So very, very high level discussion. And I think that we had a lot of good feedback. It's great to have our police chiefs in that room because they have a different way that they interact with the county, and they're out there citing people for possession, and, you know, they're having to intersect in that way. And so to hear their perspective about how things are being, you know, where the bottlenecks are, was invaluable. And I think the main conclusion after yesterday was we're just going to have to follow up with the courts and the presiding judge and say, hey, you know, how do you see this playing out in the courts? Because what the courts do and what they decide really has a downstream impact. So that's where the status of that is for now. I've invited all of those people to attend on Monday to the AOC meeting with CJC, and hopefully we have some more answers. Like I said, we don't know when the funding is coming. We don't know if there's strings attached to it. We just don't know. So I will follow up on that as well. Other than that, I don't have any more announcements.
Nothing.
I would like to request a Zoom attendance on March 28th. Don't I have to request that and get approval
For what?
To
to
be gone?
attend via Zoom?
Oh,
For you?
Yeah,
When is March 28th?
not next week, but the week after.
I don't know, Commissioner. I'm not sure about that.
Confused. What are we doing right now?
I thought it was written in policy where I had to get approval. to
That's
do that.
one of the things that
Yeah.
will be
one of the
coming
things
back
we're
in front of
fixing.
you.
Yeah, we're not sure, Commissioner.
You're not sure? Okay.
So we'll have to get back to you. We
Okay.
maybe can have,
I have a follow-up to it. If I don't get approval, I just want to make sure it doesn't go against my attendance record. So I would need approval.
An excused absence.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Um,
abstain. I'm gonna recuse myself.
So, Fair and Rodeo, we're kind of stepping it up next level. We received our road advertising signs for this year. So we're going to actually put signs up on every main entrance coming into the county, advertising Fair and Rodeo and a date. We've
That's
never
awesome.
done that before. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be
a great idea.
phenomenal.
Oh, wow.
We got those yesterday and we're going to do a little social media post with it. It's going to be cool.
Great idea.
Other Fair and Rodeo news, Joya, our economic development manager, is the open class. She's been selected to be the open class superintendent for Fair and Rodeo. So my understanding is this is like your static exhibits that would be like in the 4-H hall, the Leslie Lewis Pavilion, your artworks, your
Quilting.
canning,
Pies.
your
Yeah.
pies, the monster cookie contest. Anyway, that was pretty exciting. I didn't know she was applying for it, or maybe at one of the fair board meetings, because Joy's been going to the fair board meetings
Mhm.
for just funding purposes and helping out there. And I think they bent her ear, be like, hey, this position's open. And next
She
thing, the next meeting, I know she was on that position. So that's pretty cool.
Wonderful.
I think it's a great position for her. She's a great cook.
Yeah.
And she
She's
has.
she's
experience
actually,
with-
yeah, she's a cordon bleu level chef, trained
Yeah.
at La Varenne in Paris, and she's needs to step up her game in terms of bringing stuff into the office.
Yeah.
Well, budget week's coming up.
Oh, budget week,
We
yeah.
could, we can
Cook
employ
for
her
us.
to-
Joya.
Joya, if you're watching.
That's all I got.
Okay,
Your
I,
announcements are always so fun. Mine are like serious and.
Chair, I think
Somebody-
we should grant this request for a remote attendance at the March 28th Board of Commissioners meeting for our vice chair.
I knew I could butter.
I make
her
a
up.
motion.
As long as you don't have palm trees in the background, I'm good.
Okay. No palm trees. It's actually going to be super cold.
Okay. Makes it easier to
Yep.
just say yes.
Yeah.
Do we actually have to vote?
No.
Okay. Granted. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Hearing nothing, I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for March 14th.